If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. We are delighted to welcome Catherine Morgan to the show today. Catherine is an accomplished author and career transition specialist, having penned the book, This Isn't Working: Evolving the Way We Work to Decrease Stress, Anxiety, and Depression. Prior to establishing her consulting firm, Point A to Point B Transitions, Catherine worked for leading management consulting firms across the country. Over the past 12 years, she's been helping clients with career transitions, job searches, and business strategy. Catherine, would you mind sharing with us the inspiration and driving force behind your book?
I would love to. I have been on my soapbox about stress, anxiety, and depression in the workplace since 2015, when I gave my TEDx talk, Sustaining Personal Energy to Fuel Professional Success. I shared a story about a colleague of mine who had a stroke from work-related stress at the age of 34. And I also shared a story about a colleague of mine who overworked and took virtually no breaks for a year. And I was firmly convinced that they would have a health crisis, stroke, heart attack, cancer diagnosis. It ended up being the last one. They got treatment, are in remission. But from my point of view, that was avoidable. In addition, when we lost Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain in the same week, I lost my mind and started a video series titled The Depression Discussions, the conversations we need to keep having, interviewing people about their personal struggles and experience with anxiety and depression in an effort to decrease the stigma and shame associated with that. The acquisitions editor at my publisher, or what ended up being my publisher, found those interviews, and she had a background in mental health, asked me if I had been thinking about writing a book about this, which I hadn't, but I was happy to create a book proposal, which was submitted to the partners, and I was offered a contract. Unfortunately, the timing for this was late January, early February 2020, and I could see that COVID-19 was going to be something we've never experienced before. I just had a very strong feeling about this. And we put the project on hold, came back to it a year later, had a lot more information, and people were much more open to talking about these things instead of sweeping them under the rug. So my small book with a big mission to evolve working was published on January 31st of this year. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about it.
Well, that's wonderful. I think your idea of talking about stress, anxiety, depression in the workforce is such a timely discussion. And, I'll encourage everybody to go pick up a copy of your book and, kind of learn some of the techniques and options that you see that can help people in the workplace. But, today we wanted to discuss how to navigate through transitions. And you've mentioned in your book that career rules have changed over the last couple of years. Could you share and tell us how these career rules are today and what you're hearing from clients that are going through transitions?
Yes. People come to me and they may want to switch job functions. They may want to switch industries. They may want to totally do something different, leave a nonprofit, start a nonprofit, leave their business, go back to corporate. And I tell them that, anything is possible within reason. I mean, I'm not going to be a ballerina at this age. That's not reasonable. But if you're a white collar worker, you can relearn things, you can retool, you can reconfigure. So I generally ask people what problem they want to solve and get them in that way, because whatever you were told that you can't do this because you didn't get this degree or you don't have that background, that's nonsense. You can make pretty much whatever you want to have been. And that is my absolute experience with working with people in career transition for the past several years.
Oh, great, great. It's been a tough couple of years here with COVID and all the other economic challenges we've had in our country today. And we're all familiar with the idea of quiet quitting or the great resignation. But before we get into that, though, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the rise of quiet hiring. I understand that many HR teams are turning to more 1099s and temporary workers to fill this gap. How do you think this affects the organizations and the professionals involved in organizations with this increase of, temporary workers or the 1099s?
Well, depending on which side you're on, that could be the good news. If you're someone who's looking for contract work and likes to parachute into situations and help and problem solve, this is great news, more opportunity. If you are a member of staff who is short-staffed, and all organizations are trying to do more with fewer resources, and then layoffs leave people doing 1, 2, sometimes 3 jobs for extended periods of time, they may look at it as relief or help if, it's a good, strong hire. So generally, I'm for it, and I think that it is a good thing. What you want to avoid is having people over-contributing, being charged with more and more and more work, and no support and no light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. One of the concepts that we've heard over the last couple of years is, the increasing disengagement from the workforce. And, there are a lot of factors people are trying to, focus in and attribute to that. What's your thoughts in this area?
Well, it's a giant problem that your audience of HR professionals is undoubtedly struggling with. The statistics for disengagement are stunning. This would be funny if it wasn't so sad, but one survey I saw said 45% of professionals wouldn't recommend their jobs to their worst enemy. That's funny and not funny, but there are some ways that we can address disengagement, and that is fairly simple. Start with simple human decency and common courtesy. Start by saying please and thank you. Start by acknowledging people. People want to feel like they have a say and they have an impact and they have some autonomy, no matter what their job function is. This is not just executives. It's people at all levels of the organization. So if you start there and you add in good internal communications and get buy-in for strategic initiatives across, once again, title levels and job functions, I think we could dramatically improve engagement.
Yeah. You mentioned a concept about leadership. And, as we look at leadership, many organizations are going through changes today with new leaderships, new CEOs coming in, new leadership teams. And this creates certainly some anxiety among workers and oftentimes stress. What do you think the employees or companies can do in this regard to help with some of these transitional changes?
Once again, erring on the side of over communicating is helpful because people don't like ambiguity. Our brains are not wired to like ambiguity. We spin stories to find causes for things when we often have no data, and we'll spin to the catastrophic and the fearful. So if you can communicate what the new leader is going to do, their management style, get people aligned with the new vision, where the organization is going, why, what they expect to experience, anything that you can explain to give facts instead of the fear that people are spinning up would be really helpful.
Yeah. So there's an assumption I'm going to make here, which is, another area of transition that we see quite frequently today is in mergers and acquisition, ownership changes of control. You've got private equity and strategic takeovers that are constantly happening. So with transitions of control like that, is communications another key element to help with that, or are there other elements that you can suggest with this?
Yes, there are other elements with this one. I don't know if the average employee or, worker at a more junior level would consider that their job description and the way they're measured and their performance might change significantly as a result of VC or PE investment, for example. But when an organization's structure changes, your job function may change. If the organization used to make long-term investments in products and services, they may expect some more immediate payback if they have to go into a quarterly reporting cadence like a public company. So changes in the financial structure and the investors in an organization may change literally every aspect of working there while the name on the door didn't change. And it's really disorienting for employees if they're not aware of that.
Yeah. We touched on layoffs briefly, but given the economic winds that we're confronting right now, we're finding a lot of technology companies, especially Meta, Google, Amazon, Twitter. They've been large layoffs. So we understand, as workers in America, that sometimes companies have to do layoffs. So when they have to happen, what's your advice to organizations and to workers about how to make the best out of it? Because sometimes we have to figure out and make the best of these terminations.
Right. I like the way you say have to there. That's an important distinction, that these kinds of mass layoffs should be something of last resort, not a go-to to balance the books, because your human capital are in fact human beings who have lives and kids and mortgages and parents and things they need to do. So first of all, try to be humane in your layoffs. Try to support your employees if you can in the layoffs. The way you can manage this is, I don't know, it's so hard. If you're the one who's left in the organization, you can experience survivor guilt, or you can feel very disoriented, wondering if it was one round of layoffs or if they're queuing up another round of layoffs. It's very hard, and I think human resources professionals would be well served to be a little more compassionate and to try and understand that organizations go into fear and shut down after these kinds of layoffs. And yes, they absolutely may have been needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And the flip side here, I know hiring new employees can create transitions as well. Teams have to go through a new cycle of getting to know one another. And it's important to hire the right people, to make sure you get the right culture. But you want to be careful of toxic environments and, bullies. And you mentioned both of these issues in your book. How can, the HR pro today recognize this dysfunction and among candidates they're bringing into a really good team?
I love this question. I think there's a couple things they can do. The problem is that people should be on their best behavior in a job interview, so it could be hard to get a clear read of what a candidate would be like and if they are potentially a bully. But here's a couple thoughts that I have for you. You could look for the obvious indicators. Someone who makes racist, sexist, misogynistic, homophobic remarks, that's a clear do not move them forward in the process. You could look for them talking poorly about a former employer or former manager or former colleague, which would, might indicate that they might be the problem. And then there's a more subtle thing that you could look for. Bullies in general don't have humility or empathy. So if someone's telling the stories about their successes and they are all I, me, that could be an indicator. And as an HR professional, you could ask a question specifically around empathy, something like, you see your colleague is struggling. Tell me about a situation where that happened. What did you do? What did you say? If the interviewee cannot drop into empathy or sympathize with someone's situation or, try to be helpful, that could also be a sign.
Yeah. Catherine, I think we all know that you work with individuals in career transitions and job searches. How do you support organizations and the company themselves that are, that want to get better at helping their employees manage stress, anxiety, and depression? What insights can you give us there?
Well, they're going to need to do this. One survey I saw by the APA said 81% of employees expect their employer to consider their mental health. So organizations that are not considering mental health, in addition to physical health, a la insurance, are going to be forced to consider it. Let's put it that way. You can, in a perfect world, things are demonstrated from the top. If somebody is struggling and they ask for help, give them help. Don't make them feel ashamed that they asked. Don't tell them they should suck it up and put more shoulder to the wall to try and push through the wall. Give them some help. Normalize conversations, around struggle. If someone experienced a death in the family or another kind of loss or a health diagnosis, let's give them some flexibility in their job if that's possible, depending on their job function. If they can adjust their hours to go to their treatments. Like, there are things that we found during COVID that we can do and work still gets done and productivity does not drop. So I think if employers try to be a little more flexible and trust that they hired good people who want to do a good job, that might be a great start.
Yeah. You touched on, the ideas that during COVID, how it taught us all that we can be more flexible. We don't have to approach work from the old mindset that we had of it's got to be structured, you got to be in the office. And I think, that the benefits that this put America through was it showed us there's some other ways to approach business. And the best thing we can do now is adopt those best practices that have come out of that and make sure we're flexible in bringing those to the workplace.
I absolutely agree. And some worst practices that showed up during COVID were people who were required to log on and keep their cameras on all day to ensure that they were sitting at their desk. That failed miserably, and people could not get to the door fast enough. Any good employee who was employable by somebody else left.
Oh, that's right. Well, before we sign off here today, Catherine, I'd like to ask you the question that I ask all of the guests that we have. And that if S2 Verify were to conduct a background screening check on you, would we be surprised with any findings?
You'd be surprised how boring I am. I don't even have a parking ticket.
Well, that's amazing because I don't think I can say the same thing. Well, Catherine, thank you for joining us today. And, tell our audience where they can find more information about you and about your book, and give them some insight on where they can track you down.
Okay. Well, my website is point A to point B, transitions.com, has everything about me and the services I offer. My book, This Isn't Working, ! Evolving the Way We Work to Decrease Stress, Anxiety, and Depression, is available wherever you buy books.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. I know our audience will appreciate your insights and perspective. And for our audience, please tune in next week for a conversation with Jillian Godfrey, the Chief People Officer at Storable. And it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.